You're listening to Cinematic Adventures, proud member of the Misfit Faction Media Network.
Good morning, Vietnam!
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
I feel the need for speed.
Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
Badges? We don't need no badges. I don't have to show you any stinking badges.
You make me want to be a better man.
Nobody puts baby in a corner.
I wish I knew how to quit you.
Love means never having to say you're sorry.
He's looking at you, kid.
I've always depended on the kindness of strangers.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Would you be shocked if I put on something more comfortable?
You know how to whistle, don't you, Steve? You just put your lips together and blow.
I'm not bad. I'm just drawn that way.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cinematic Adventures. Don't forget, if you guys are listening to us on the go, you can find us on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and basically anywhere you get your podcasts. And right now, it's just me in the studio. We have a little something different for you guys this week due to the fact that I'm actually on vacation right now. Like, I'm on the beach. So sorry, guys, but Sean and I didn't want to leave you guys hanging without an episode this week. So what we did is we took one of our interviews from one of our other shows, MF Uncensored. If you guys haven't heard it yet, make sure you guys check out MF Uncensored. It's been a lot of fun. We do tons of interviews, tons of topical stuff, and we've had some really interesting people on. And since we are in the month of May, and the month of April, and we're getting close to May, I wanted to do this one for you guys because this is with Mr. Bruce Valanche. Guys, if you guys don't know who Bruce Valanche is, you know who Bruce Valanche is. He is one of the most recognizable Hollywood icons of all time. He's been in the industry forever and ever, and he was actually one of the writers of the Star Wars holiday special. So with May, Star Wars month coming up, what better time than to release this one on Cinematic Adventures for you guys. Before we do that, I want to make sure you guys remember, check out our brand new store on our website, themisfitfaction.com. You'll find all of our new t-shirts, our brand new hoodie that just dropped, and a long sleeve shirt for Cinematic Adventures with the quote, "I'm not even supposed to be here today." And make sure you guys check out some of our other shows, Multiverse Fancast and Cinematic Adventures. Also, if you guys are looking to start your very own podcast, maybe you guys have been listening to us for the past couple of years, maybe it's something you've always wanted to do. If you guys go to go to podbean.com/misfitfaction, you'll get a free month of podcasting on us. It's a thank you to all of our listeners for their loyalty for the last couple of years. Also, if you guys are looking to start your own podcast, let us know. Get in touch with us. We are always looking to build the show and add to it, so make sure you guys reach out, and we'll help you get started, and maybe there'll be a spot for you at the Misfit Faction. We also have our sponsorship opportunity. Guys, podcasts are everywhere. There are millions and millions of podcasts, and if you guys have a business or you have an online service, something that you promote, something that you try to make your livelihood off of, advertising is the way to go, and podcasts are a great way to do it. If you guys go to sponsorship.podbean.com/misfitfaction, you'll get $100 of free advertising. Again, that's a thank you to us for all of our loyal listeners. And now, without further ado, here's our interview with Bruce Valanche. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of MF Uncensored. If you guys are listening to us on the go, you can find us on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Paul, and I'm very excited. I am so excited for today's episode. We have a very special guest via Zoom with the clothing optional aspect, and that is if you have basically watched any television over the past 30-ish plus years, there's a fair chance that you're going to be familiar with this guy's work. I know I am, and that is Mr. Bruce Valanche. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello. It's a pleasure. I'm waving to people who I can't. Hello. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we'll just say what we were doing at the time.
I'm feeding the dog and I'm topless. It's raining here, and so everything was screwed up. Cyberly, because when it rains, this town in LA, they freak out. There's like a layer of oil on the streets, and so everybody crashes into everybody else because suddenly it turns slick. That's the beginning.
Well, it's funny.
You sit and outside, you hear the sounds of, and then people yelling at each other, and
In New York, people just forget how to drive when it rains, and then suddenly everybody's just driving 3.5 miles an hour.
That's the other thing, yeah.
New York and L.A., famous for their traffic and for their acting. Very strange.
Exactly right.
So
entertainment capitals, theater capitals of the world.
So,
all right, those are my nipples. Yes.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, it's
I'm
only
looking at myself topless. I'm so sorry we can't share this with the world in Zoom, but hey, much better this way. Trust me.
At least I didn't put it on Snapchat. That would have been way worse. What is this guy doing on his podcast? You got to listen to find out.
What is this?
TikTok. I just discovered TikTok, and it is it's an adventure in itself. So,
I just feel like only like teenage girls did it, and I guess that there's a large market of people who are after teenage girls for whatever reason.
So strange.
And so it has managed to morph into something else, and it'll probably wind up, like Tinder or like Tumblr or OnlyFans, and just totally be taken over by porn, and then everybody will get outraged and move on to the next platform.
And that you've been in the entertainment business long enough to know that it's always about the next platform, and it's always about what's coming up next. So why don't we start at the beginning, right? So I want to say 70s, 1974-ish is
Well, that's when I moved. 75 is when I moved out here. I was a journalist at the time. I had been a child actor, but never a child star, or we'd be having this conversation in rehab at Malibu with other Mouseketeers. But I had, because I was heavy and I had a deep voice and I looked 40. I was auditioning opposite guys who actually were those things, and I was not getting cast. So I fell back on my other skill, which was writing, and I began writing about show business and features generally. I wound up at the Chicago Tribune writing, being a feature writer for them. And I met Bette Midler, who was just starting out. She was a Jewish girl from Hawaii, which already was interesting.
Sounds like a setup to a joke.
Well, that was our first joke. It was tough being a Jewish girl, the only Jewish girl in the Samoan neighborhood.
I can't imagine why.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the beginning, and she was on Broadway already in Fiddler on the Roof, getting married every night. And to go after the show to a club called the Improv down the street and start doing material, singing basically, and occasionally a joke. And her hairdresser would give her a line. And she came to Chicago on her vacation with this act, and I knew her manager, so I went and reviewed it, and I loved it. She knocked me out. And I did an interview with her, and she liked the interview, said, "You're a very funny writer." And I said, "Well, you're funny. You should talk more on stage." And she said, "You got any lines?" And that was the beginning. And I began, and it was 50 years ago. I'm clutching my left breast now, located somewhere near my heart. I began writing for her, and that was how it started. People would come through town, and they knew who I was through her, or I would I would meet them through my job at the Trib, and I began writing for a lot of other people. And after 5 years of that, we sold CBS a TV series starring a group called the Manhattan Transfer, which had been started by a guy whose sister was Bette's dresser. So we were on the ground floor of the Transfer. And they got a summer TV series replacing Cher. And I was already writing for Cher from a distance. I was writing for Cher. Sonny and Cher, Sonny without Cher, Cher without Sonny, Sonny and Cher, I hate you, but I need the money. I mean, there were many 6 degrees of Sonny and Cher. So, and I came out here and I stayed because it was the very end of variety television. When I came out here, there was a Carol Burnett show and a Dean Martin show and a Mac Davis show and a Flip Wilson show. And all of that went away when cable came in because you no longer had to wait around until Thursday at 8 o'clock to see somebody who you liked. You could go to HBO and you could get Madonna every hour on the hour, or MTV, you could see these people constantly. So variety kind of dried up. It became award shows. And I wound up specializing in those and writing for the people on them.
And now, speaking of a show that you wrote for and you were also involved with, a lot of people know you, Hollywood Squares.
Then after 20 years of that, they came to me and asked me to be the head writer on the latest iteration of Hollywood Squares. So, of course, I said yes. And then they went to Whoopi, who I've been working with for years, and asked her to be the head square, the center square. And so she said yes, and so I was writing a lot for her, and she said, "Oh, I think Vilanch should host the show." So, they thought she was nuts, but they weren't going to piss her off this early in the game, so they tested me. So I got to do it, said, "This is for the win, Louise." And they said, well, you're not exactly mainstream. We're looking for something a little bit more relatable to the Irving average audience. But they put me in the square next to her, thinking I would tame her.
Okay.
And which she's untamable. And as she's very fond of saying, they didn't realize that I'm really, she would say it. She said, they didn't realize that I'm really a gay Jewish man and you're really a black woman.
I don't know how people get that confused.
Ask anybody who slept with me, they will tell you that's the truth. So meanwhile, we had a good time with each other. Mm-hmm. And so after 6 years of that, when you're on TV every night, you get approached to do all kinds of things. And among the things I auditioned for was Hairspray. Mm-hmm. So I shaved my beard and I played the mother in Hairspray for 2 years on the road and on Broadway. And now I became a person that I go to airports and people surround me for selfies. And while we're doing that, somebody walks by and say, who's that?
It's like the best of both worlds.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like, it's not like Brad Pitt where he has to, have people buy his clothing for him.
Yeah.
Because he'll get mobbed everywhere. But it's nice. It's nice that you walk in places that go, oh, hello, like they know you. Mm-hmm. And then they're nicer to you.
It's the weirdest thing, right?
Yeah, that's the best part of fame.
The best part, the unexpected part of fame.
The worst part of fame for me is that as an actor, I'm iconic. My look is iconic, and people look at me and they go, "Well, we have to totally change his look to play the part," which I would do, but not for no money. and if it was something real, yeah, I would do it. But they just it sends the audience down the wrong road when I show up looking like me. So that's the worst part of it. The nice, and the other part that you keep forgetting about is that you meet a lot of people, and they know you don't know them, and it's a big deal for them, and they'll remember this for the rest of their lives. And if you're an asshole, they remember that. That's what they say. So, and I got that from observing famous people for 20 years before I got famous. And I realized that you just have to always be on, nice patrol, because they will. My mother, I worked with Marvin Hamlisch a lot, and my mother finally met Marvin at something, and she had gone to camp with his mother, and she was so excited to tell him this, and she told him I was a kid, and he just kind of looked at her and said, "Really?" and turned away and talked to somebody else. From that day forward, whenever I mentioned Marvin's name, she would go, "That shithole! What a miserable person!" She would never let go. But there were many things of which she would never let go, but that's just a minor thing she would never let go. And she's not alone in that. A lot of people are like that. It's like, oh well, I met her and she was kind of rude. She tore me a new one or whatever,
Yeah, a lot of people, that's just what they remember. They remember all these negative things, these negative interactions, especially when it comes to celebrities. You always hear the stories about, celebrities that go into coffee shops and they were rude, but they could have been just working for 20 hours or something ridiculous. People just don't understand.
When you go on weight loss programs and of the 12-step variety, and they tell you they teach you the HALT method, which is HALT. Before you eat, are you hungry? Are you angry? Are you lonely? Are you tired? Examine those things before you put the fork in the potato.
I just eat because I'm hungry.
And because that's generally how a lot of people meet a lot of people. That's what you are at that moment, and so you react that way. You're in a vulnerable state. But nobody wants to know that. Nobody wants to know that Taylor Swift was hungry.
They want to know.
All they think is Taylor Swift dissed me,
and that's what everybody wants to talk about. That's
all I remember. And I'm making this up. I've never heard that about her, but it's just a name I pulled out of my old recordings that I'm redoing.
She could be a lovely person for all we know, but there was that one time. But so you mentioned talking about your trademark look, and I gotta ask, how did the trademark look, the Bruce Valanche, come about?
It was cumulative. First of all, I was a fat kid, and my mother was a real controlling kind of OCD person, and I always had to look just so. I mean, the kind euphemism for this is perfectionist, but it's beyond the valley of perfectionism. It's a clinical condition, and she, and I always hate, so I was always dressed up. And, you know, when you're fat, nothing fits. Nothing's ever made, you know, for fat kids. And so I was wearing ties and I couldn't breathe and all that kind of stuff. So I somewhere in the back of my head, I determined the moment I got out of her, off of the leash, I was going to dress the way I wanted, which turned out to be T-shirts and easy things and you know, big clothes to get into. And I moved to LA, and in LA, you can go virtually anywhere in a T-shirt, especially if you're famous enough. You can go in a torn T-shirt. And it was, at the beginning, I had the layered look when I was still in Chicago. I would have two shirts. I'd wear a shirt and a shirt over it. So it kind of was smock-like. And then it was a shirt over a T-shirt, and then I ditched the other shirt when I got to a warm place. And so that was a look, and it was the 70s, and ironic T-shirts were just coming into vogue. You know, I'm with stupid with an arrow, that kind of thing. So I had a ball doing all of that. And then I was always a hippie, and the Trib made me cut my hair, and then, because they were very conservative paper, and then when they discovered they could market me as a hippie, they let me grow my hair. And so I was the guy who went to the rock concerts and who reviewed Metallica, you know, and the stuff I'd never had in the paper before. And so, I grew a beard. I was in a movie. I was in an Italian picture called Excuse Me, My Name is Rocco Papaleo. Permette Rocco Papaleo. It has the distinction of being the only Marcello Mastroianni movie to flop in Italy. And this was a big deal because Marcello Mastroianni was like, you know, Tom Cruise, Bradley Cooper, all of those guys in one. He was a huge, huge international star. And he made this picture in Chicago, and I had to have a 3-day growth of beard for 6 weeks. And that's the itchiest, as you probably know, itchiest time, and when you just start growing it. And every day I had to shave it back, and it was a nightmare. And when it was over, I said, I am never shaving again. And so for 31 years, I had a beard. So I looked like a furry freak brother. And I always had to wear glasses. And when I got on Hollywood Squares, well, I did another movie for Sidney Lumet called The Morning After with Jane Fonda. And it was his only movie he made in Hollywood. And he said, everybody in this picture is going to be blonde. So I went blonde, and I never looked back. And my mother said, oh, that's your original color. I said, oh, good. And then I had to wear glasses every night. I wore glasses. And so in Hollywood Squares, but I kept changing them. I would get different glasses every night. And the red glasses were the ones that stuck, which was good because when the prescription changed, I would have to take a second mortgage on the house to get all the glasses changed. So that's how the look evolved. And then when I did hairspray, they made me shave because they said nobody will buy. They'll buy that a man's playing this woman, but they will not buy that this woman has a hormone problem. It was a little too John Waters. So I shaved, and here I am. That is the genealogy of the look, which I've never explained that way before. And now I think I have a podcast of my own I got to do.
Oh, that's awesome, though. I love it. Like, you know, it's funny. Hollywood is so filled with people who try and create their look, and they're like, this is the thing that I do, and this is... And to hear how that happens is always fun.
I think that's why people put up with it, because they know it's organic. You know, I meet a lot of people, and I think, boy, he's trying very hard to be a character.
Yeah.
You know, he's somebody who will be noticed in the crowd. And of course, you know, we all have little things to do. You know, Barbra Streisand dropped an A out of her first name. And Bette Midler, who to this day maintains her mother named her after Betty Davis, but in England they call her Bette Davis. And since her mother was a Jewish girl from Jersey, I don't quite know how that reads, but whatever it is, she certainly automatically made her stand out from other people who were named Betty, with that spelling, and so forth and so on. I mean, a lot of people come up with things just to give yourself a little edge, you know, over all of that. And, you know, there's Madonna, there's Cher, there's all the one-named people.
Everybody's got to have a gimmick nowadays. Make it easy. You got to stand out, because in this world, like we were talking about, like TikTok and Snapchat and all that stuff, it's easy to get everywhere. It's a lot, like it's not like it was even just like 10, 15 years ago. Like if you wanted to be an actor, you wanted to be famous, there was a process and work to it. Nowadays,
what I always tell people is say, how do I get started? I said, well, when I was getting started, it was much harder. You actually had to produce something. You actually had to, you know, audition. Now you put yourself on YouTube or TikTok Snapchat or Eat Shit, whatever the latest thing is, and you create yourself. Randy Rainbow created himself on YouTube, and he's brilliant and funny. He's a friend of mine, and he's it's wonderful that he could do that. That guy who spent a year going, "Leave Britney alone," is now has a house in Malibu. So it's hard to judge. This is the way it is. And it's so much easier. The downside of that is a lot of people who really should be discouraged are encouraged. Pauline Kael wrote, "Hollywood is where you can be encouraged to death." And that's what the internet is. The internet is where you can be encouraged to death. As long as there's a Kickstart and the GoFundMe and all of that stuff, people who really should not be doing this stuff are enabled. They feel like they have, oh, look, I have 300 hits, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That, not hits like Cole Porter had 300 hits. They had, or the Rolling Stones had 300 hits. They have 300 people who, clicked, looked for a second, and went away.
Oh yeah, I mean, we made our very first TikTok for our podcast network, and it's literally just a short little intro of just what we do and just some music, and in a couple of minutes, it's like, why do we have 50 likes? It's like the most boring video of all time, but that's just what people do. They scroll through and they just like things. They watch them for a couple seconds and scroll to the next. It's a lot of But you've been
that's what Netflix. That's why everybody is so mad at Netflix, because Netflix and in fact all of them, Hulu, Amazon, Peacock, the works, they measure their audience in how many eyeballs were on the screen for how long. They'll say, well, we got 70 million people who watched for at least an hour. What does that mean? That means they hated. They all looked at Red Notice because it had Rock the Dwayne Johnson and Ryan Reynolds and Gal Gadot, but they all turned it off after an hour. They said, "This is crap," and they turned it off. Is that what that means? So how effective was those 70 million people? It's impossible to say, but people have been arguing about ratings for years and years because it's a statistical sample, and you have to believe what Nielsen says, which is if they have 1,200 people who they base the rating on, and it's random, and 30 of them went out to grandpa's to visit and didn't watch TV, that means 30 million people went to grandpa's and didn't watch TV. But if you buy random sampling, you can't argue it.
I mean,
that was interesting, wasn't it, folks?
Well, I mean, for anybody who's interested in the Nielsen rating system, I mean, I think it's.
when I was at the Trib, I was, among other things, a TV critic, and I always said back then, I said the sad part is the methodology of measuring who watches is so much more interesting than the shows themselves that are being watched. And then along came All in the Family, Norman Lear, and all that stuff, and the landscape began to change.
Yeah, and even more so now with DVR and Netflix and all these available.
Well, now of course broadcasting has become narrowcasting because the audience used to have at least a third of the available audience watching you to stay on the air, which in prime time meant you had to have at least 17 million people watching you.
Oh wow!
And back then, and now it's like if you get 10 watching you, that's a big audience, and football gets 20, which is huge. So it's because there's so many more options now.
And then you get a station like the CW that'll have a show that pulls in 2 million people, and they're like, "That's big for us. We're going to keep the show on for 30 years."
If 400,000 people watch Riverdale, odds are there are 400,000 teenage girls who are waiting for KJ Apa to take his shirt off and to find out what the latest is in the Reggie Veronica romance or whatever their story is. And if you're selling tampons, that's your target market. You're selling, and because they're just using tampons for the first time, and you want a lifelong customer there. So that's where you put your time. And I don't mean to choose them for vulgar reasons, although it is kind of funny. But seriously, that is the audience. That's the YA, young adult audience. And if you're an advertiser and you want the most efficient bang for your buck, that's where you do it. That's why football, you see every truck in the world is advertised on football, because who's watching it? People who drive trucks. That's who's watching.
I'm guilty.
Along with a lot of other people.
I drive a truck.
That's
so
the best example, because that's a real what they call a 4-quadrant show, where old, young, male, female, they're all watching.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at these numbers and you go, well, not that many people tuned in, but like Spencer Tracy said about Katharine Hepburn, there wasn't much of her, but what was there was church.
Love it. So, one of the biggest things, and I need to bring it up because, obviously it's also the holiday season, so I'm going to ask. You are quite well known for a little film called the Star Wars Holiday Special.
Yeah, Carving the Tombstone Now. Yes, he wrote it. Yes, he co-wrote it.
But, it's funny because people talk about the Star Wars Holiday Special, and it's got a little bit of a cult following nowadays. People look at it very differently. Like it's an interesting beast in itself, and especially now with Star Wars being so prominent in media.
It's a cult following like Jeffrey Dahmer has a cult following. It's like a hate cult following. It's like we're united in our hatred of this and our ridiculousness, our lampooning it, and it starts, of course, with the hardcore group that felt betrayed by George because he even did it.
Yeah.
But I say several things about this thing whenever I'm asked. One is that if we'd known that 45 years later people would still be talking about it, we might have paid closer attention. And it was the 70s, and so everybody was chemically altered. And I joke about Carrie Fisher and I snorting the sweet and low. But then I see stories saying, Vilanch, who admits to copious cocaine abuse during the... Wait, I didn't admit to that. I was making a joke. So, if it adds luster to me, fine. But I don't want people to think that I was off my head. It was what we did, those crazy shows in those days. But the other thing that really upsets people is when I tell them that when we did the show, a lot of people were not that impressed with Star Wars. Mm-hmm. Star Wars was a big summer movie the year before, and a phenomenon. It was a blockbuster, and nobody was exactly sure why, because to older people, it reminded them of the Republic Studio serials that they used to go see as kids on Saturday morning. And in fact, George borrowed a lot of things from those with the wipes and the whole episodic, the thing at the scrolling up the screen with the, at the beginning. That's all old B movie stuff. And so they weren't knocked out by it. And George was about to do The Empire Strikes Back, and he was trying to stir the pot with this thing and sold one of his leftover stories to CBS as a thing. And what happened was it was funny and terrible and did okay in the ratings and it was forgotten pretty much. And then along came the VHS, and a generation that had not seen Star Wars movies as kids watched them as kids on VHS. And then came the internet. And so they got to really go crazy with the internet, and they found this special. And they saw it. And by that time, Star Wars had become the Scientology of the nerds. And it took on a religious aspect. And even George, made fun of that. And they would see this show and they would say, how could he betray us like this? Mm-hmm. And fortunately, so George was very busy burning every copy he could find. And of course, it was too late, that the internet ship had sailed. And so and then every time when he did the back 3 movies that he had always planned to make, he'd always planned to make 6 pictures. Mm-hmm. It surfaced every time. And then when Rebel 1 came out, and when Solo came out, and then when the new generation of movies came out, now it won't go away. It cannot be. And he finally acknowledged that when he let Lego do a Star Wars holiday special that referenced it. Mm-hmm. And I think partially that's because he's determined to get Life Day as a holiday. And I keep saying that there's already, May 4th, May the 4th be with you, ready to start with holiday. But, I guess I'm sort of like a half-assed beneficiary because I keep having to talk about the thing. It remains current. Mm-hmm. There's always, like you're much younger and it's something that's in your world. So but people often get, people who are really invested in the whole Star Wars mythology get very annoyed when I say, it had humble beginnings. Yes, it was a big hit, but it wasn't well thought of by a whole lot of people.
Right.
It wasn't badly thought of. It just was. It was dismissed. It was, well, that's a thing. That was a phenom, and it'll go away. And of course, it didn't.
Yes, Star Wars is one of the best examples of how bad a fandom can actually get. I mean, you look at the fans of Star Wars, and they're one of two camps. They're either we love Star Wars, or it's the we hate everything.
We hate. Well, that's actually a serious reason that motivated George to try and get rid of the show, because he was getting death threats, and he was. I mean, yeah, some people are crazy.
Yeah,
I mean they're living in that world, you know, and it's always hard. I mean, if you go to Comic-Con, it's very difficult to say this guy is living it and this guy is playing it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's kind of like certain sex parties, if you've ever done those, where you go to Berlin and you realize that these guys are not fooling around. These guys, this is their life. They are living leather.
I love it. But
I said that was a little side detour, but
I'll take any detour, all the detours, all the distractions, all the detours. That's literally what I signed up for. I love it. But you know, it's funny you mentioned Comic-Con. The first time I ever went to Comic-Con, I wore a Superman shirt, and I was like, you know, we're going to Comic-Con. I'm going to wear it. I like Superman. He's my favorite superhero. People fought me about a Superman shirt. Like, they're like, this character could beat Superman. I'm like, I'm just going to the merch tent. Like.
Exactly, yeah.
Just going to buy a churro. Leave me alone.
Yeah, leave me alone, exactly. It's just a costume. It's kind of like, it's only a joke.
Exactly. And, you know, I love that you say it, because we live in a world where people are almost scared to make jokes now. So
somebody wrote an article, and I wish I could remember it. I have to look it up. But the title explained it all. The title was Everybody's Hitler.
Oh, boy.
And it was you do something and you say something and they'll say, that's just like Hitler. That's what Hitler would say. That's how Hitler started. And of course, it only applies to certain cases like Trump, where he really did use the Hitler playbook.
A little bit.
But I mean, you know, neutralize the media and demonize the people who are opposed to you, and all that is all out of the Hitler playbook. But generally, it's now come to cover everything. You know, if you're wearing a Superman shirt, you're Hitler. You're a terrible person. How could you do that? Basically, because you're treading on my epic belief, whatever my epic belief happens to be.
So how do you take? You're a big writer. You've done the Oscars. You've done jokes for famous comedians. You've been around for like some of the best of the best. Do you take things into the account like that during your writing process, or do you just?
You have to. I mean, now, especially now, you have to, and I'm very glad, in a way, that I'm not somebody who has to come out every night, you know, or has to go in every day and hand Jimmy Kimmel 18 jokes, the way we used to have to hand Johnny Carson 18 jokes by 2:30. But there are these guys: Colbert, Kimmel, Corden, Samantha Bee, Trevor Noah. Seth Meyers, Jimmy Fallon, every night these people have to go out there and be funny, and be funny and topical. And you're stepping on everybody's toe when you do that. I mean, and I understand, you know, that after the things have changed but it's unfortunately a lot of that stuff is death to comedy. It might be that it's just as well. You know, I mean, I'm a member of many minorities and at least one majority, fat people. And I mean, you know, and I love the idea that fat shaming has now finally come under the microscope. And, you know, I wrote a million fat jokes myself, and that's because I'm fat and I thought I had the franchise. And I'm gay and I'm Jewish, and so I could make jokes, you know, about gay, and I can call other gay guys fags, and it's okay. Just like rappers use the N-word all the time, and somehow they get a pass. But let anybody else try, and oh my God, you're the racist and you must be canceled. Go live in a hovel. So it's become a very difficult time. But you always have to kind of keep that in mind. And you know, one general rule used to be, did anybody die? You know, if you're going to make jokes, did anybody die? And when does that, like, you know, is the Titanic safe? You know, or I sometimes say, I do a joke about an experience I had with a Japanese woman farting in an inappropriate place. And I said, really, when was the last time you heard a Japanese person fart? Hiroshima? And I get, ooh, and I say, too soon?
Is somebody
It was
here from there?
1945.
Is
Too
somebody
soon.
here from Hiroshima?
But it's that the whole idea. It's like everybody's Hitler. It's like, yeah, I went to this extreme because the other trope I'm using is the Japanese people are very self-contained.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's an interesting image because everything is contextual. In the context of this story, it makes sense. So you're always kind of juggling that. It's like I did a joke the other day, and somebody called me out on it. There was, oh God, something happened. Oh, it was the tornado hit Bowling Green, Kentucky.
Right.
And I said, oh, well, Kellyanne Conway finally has her Bowling Green massacre. It was a callback to what Sewer Rat Barbie said years ago. She made up a shooting incident. And don't forget the Bowling Green massacre. And there was no Bowling Green massacre. She made that shit up. And somebody said, people died in that tornado, and you might want to rethink doing that joke at all. And she was right, this person who called me out on it. And so I deleted it. Mm-hmm. Because when people die, it becomes a real gallows humor kind of joke. Those jokes don't go away.
Yeah,
they just become the great unspoken jokes that people tell each other in the hushed confines of the dressing rooms of comedy clubs.
So, tell me a little bit about
where Louis C.K. is beating off to whatever waitress comes by.
That took a dark turn really quick, and I love it. I see. I'm one of those people. I like humor. Humor is just and it's so subjective. And I whenever I watch something, I always try and watch it through every lens that I possibly can. I may not relate to it, but I can still laugh. Yeah. I can still laugh about it. And I love that you're the type of comedian, the type of writer that, you say it like it is, and it's funny because it's true, and it's a lot of fun. So, what is your writing process like? How like if you're gonna write a joke, like where does it start? Well,
panic is the mother of invention, and generally it's because I have a task. I've got to deliver something to somebody, mm-hmm. or if it's just to myself, or when I'm performing. Excuse me, I have to come up with something new, and so you cast your eye around the world. Well, like the Bowling Green thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, here was this thing. I thought when I saw Bowling Green, I immediately thought, oh, there's a joke there because of what the Scarecrow Barbie did when she invented the Bowling Green massacre. So that's how that is born in. Mm-hmm. And I guess that you just kind of it comes to you. You either it's a way you have of looking at the world. And I don't know exactly how it develops, but it does. And I mean, some people will look at something and it won't occur to them. And I mean, I can look at this is biblical. I can look at a field and say, well, that's pretty. Somebody can look at a field and say, this is a good field for corn. And they'll buy it and they'll plant corn. Mm-hmm. And it's a biblical description of a good wife. She considers a field. Yeah. Is one of the things that a good wife does. In other words, she knows what that field will yield mm-hmm. for her family. So, and it's kind of the same things. I mean, you either have that thing or you don't have that thing. So that's where it comes from.
I love it.
This is so highfalutin, I can't believe it.
Well, we are winding down on our time together, so I do want to ask one question.
11 inches. Everybody asks.
How did you know? It was like you're in my head.
Because they can't contain themselves. Neither can I. They burn to know.
Everybody, all my listeners, now they're gonna know.
So that's out of the way now. Yes.
So then I'll ask a follow-up question then. Who's your inspiration? Like who really, like when you think of your stuff, who comes to mind?
Well, again, it's whoever I'm working with at the time. But I mean, when inspiration, I mean, obviously my muse is, if I didn't say it was Bette Midler, I'd be a fool because we've been doing it for half a century. And it just keeps, she's my fave. But I mean, there are people who inspire me. I mean, Steve Martin is brilliant and he's such an oddball. And Letterman is another one. I mean, these oddball guys who just have such a skewed look at the world. I mean, and George Carlin. I mean, I admired him, Richard Pryor, and I wrote for all of these people. And at the time, they were who was inspiring me. But I don't have them as such. You know, I mean, I like that. I mean, as an actor, obviously, maybe not obviously, but I always. I was a musical comedy guy, and I liked the fat guys, you know, Zero Mostel, Jackie Gleason, Nathan Lane, who's a good friend of mine and who I write with. And I mean, I love those guys who were in film, they tend to be the sidekicks, but on stage, they're center stage because the personalities are so huge that they have to be, like Harvey Fierstein, who I followed in Hairspray. You know, I mean, there's no bigger personality than that.
That's awesome. So
I know I need that.
Caught me off guard. I wasn't ready. But so before we sign off, any upcoming projects, anything that we can look forward to in the near future?
Oh, a bunch of stuff I can't promote. It's terrible. I got nothing to plug, and I do these shows anyway, except I will be. Where will I be? I think I'll be in Fort Lauderdale, March 12th, where the boys are, at a new theater called the. So I'll be there. It'll probably be spring break, and hopefully we will have gone through this variant and maybe even another one.
Oh God!
So it's a long range plug, but I got nothing more. I got nothing live. More. It's just kind of all coming back, and now everything is slowly being canceled. So who knows?
So basically,
but you'll be hearing about a few things. Some television things upcoming, of which I cannot speak.
So basically, you're telling me I have to email you again in March and just kind of follow up again?
Any old time. Perfectly.
Oh, yeah. Well, for those of you guys, obviously people don't know, but the email exchange between the two of us was one of my favorite ones ever.
Oh, great.
It was
I like the name. What, Misfit? What did
the Misfit Faction. Yep. That's our little...
And I thought, this is a Marilyn Monroe queen. And we're going to have a whole discussion about Marilyn and the polka dot dress and all of that stuff. And then, there's already another movie called The Misfits, which keeps showing up on cable. And I forget what it is. It's kind of like, it's an action picture is all I can think of. Or it might be like teenagers in a house trapped with a slasher or a supernatural force. There's lots of that. I surf all the time. The thumb has been very busy checking out what's on Showtime Extreme, or whatever those channels are.
HBO Go, Max Prime, French version.
All of it.
Everything.
All of the above.
Well, Bruce, thank you so much for coming on tonight. This was a blast. I really hope I can get you back on again. And
absolutely.
You have a good rest of your day, all right?
You too. Enjoy Putnam.
Enjoy good old Putnam in the 20-degree weather.
Oh, it's pretty, though. It's so pretty.
Yeah, it is pretty. But thank you so much.
It's above Rockland, or is it?
It's in the area. It's right around Rockland and Dutchess and all that.
Before Sullivan and.
Oh yeah, Sullivan's a little bit further up our way.
And Dutchess and all that stuff. Because I now have friends in all of them. They've abandoned the city.
Oh yeah, no, nobody wants to live in the city anymore.
Yeah, they've abandoned the city, and even Brooklyn was too much for them.
Oh, I can imagine.
Too many guys, pork pie hats and baby strollers. They said, no, I want to go to the country.
To the country where there are fields. Nothing but fields. Right. Thank you again, Bruce. Take care. I don't think I've ever laughed so hard during an interview. I'm going to apologize right now for the amount of laughter that I threw in. But for those of you guys listening, Bruce was so generous with his time and just so generous with arranging this and just so quick to really jump in with me. And, when we talked in the pre-interview, he was very open and honest about what he wanted to talk about. And when I asked him, what don't you want to talk about? He literally said, I'm an open book. You ask away. So I want to thank Bruce for spending some time with me this afternoon. And hopefully we're going to get him back on the show really soon, especially if he's got projects up in the works. But I want to thank you guys for listening. This was a great interview. I had a blast with it. If you guys, again, listening to us on the go, you can find us on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, basically anywhere you get podcasts. You can also find our website, themisfitfaction.com. There you'll find links to all of our other podcasts, including the Multiverse Fancast, MF Uncensored, and Cinematic Adventures. Make sure while you're there, you download, you check out our contact page, so that way if you guys are looking to be a guest on the show, that's the way to do it. You can also find us on YouTube, the Misfit Faction Media Network. You can find us on Instagram at the Misfit Faction, and you can find us on Twitter at Misfit Faction. The titles get shorter just as the episode starts to wind down. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Paul, and we will be back next time.